We're writing checks that we cannot cash as a civilization for the future. And they're going to bounce. And my fear is that our children are going to pay that price.
We have the data. As a scientific community, we have the data. Now we must act.
Dad, the car is heating up. It's going to explode. We can't get out.
We're approaching tipping points, which could result in irreversible changes.
Join the dots. It's happening. It's happening in your world. It's happening in my world. And let's be very clear about this. It is going to get much worse.
If drastic measures aren't taken right now to arrest the warming of the planet, the world we know today won't exist in 50 years. A report from the United Nations has made the stark prediction.
What we do between 2020 and 2030, from the evidence we have today, my conclusion is it will be the decisive decade for humanity's future on Earth.
It is expensive to not deal with climate change. And if we do not act now, these costs will only grow.
Exactly the path that we are on now invites, for the most vulnerable and poorest people on Earth, fundamentally unlivable conditions. So our urgent reduction of emissions is compelled by public conscience and by common sense.
There can be up to 60 million jobs that could be created as a result of a more green economy.
The cost of renewables around the world has absolutely plummeted. Renewables are bringing new, clean jobs to communities. We're seeing a new industrial revolution.
You're listening to The Climate Revolution. Literally, because this is what it sounds like. The climate revolution is what happens when millions of people begin to find each other and start working for one common goal: climate safety. We turn over governments and implement new climate-safe rules and regulations. We fire the incompetent CEOs and church leaders and teach our friends and neighbors how not to harm, but to do good. We transform our energy systems. We make climate-safe road infrastructures with bike paths and recharging stations for our electric vehicles, and we retrofit our homes and make them climate-safe too. We support those farmers who are regenerating the soil and sequestering carbon from the air. We boycott products that are climate destructive. We stop the climate criminals who are stealing from the future, stealing from our children and from future generations and from all living creatures on this blue planet. We restore an entire civilization that was so much going out the wrong tangent. So what? I can hear you thinking. But I'm not kidding. That's the plan. And it's not just something that's going to happen. It's already happening. We've been made to believe that it's all so very complicated. It's going to cost an awful lot of sacrifices and money. And that's true in one way, but it's also a big lie. Because our political leaders at the moment, they have simply not shown us the respect to actually tell us the truth about what the future will look like once we have made these investments. And they shy away, just like the mainstream media is doing it all the time, from actually telling us the truth about the climate emergency, how dangerous it is, but also how really simple it is to solve it. There's a recipe for this, and that's what this podcast series we call The Climate Revolution is about. It's about being more specific, and just to line it up in brief, it's about that we start with ourselves, with our neighborhood, with the local community, and we revolutionize the way that we live into a low-carbon lifestyle. That is actually not as hard as it may sound. It can be done in just a few months if you get into it. Then we take that revolution to our city halls and to the parliaments at the next elections. And again, the movement is really simple. It's out with the old and in with the new. In with the new people. We are going to vote in the Greens, the Independents, and all the small new climate parties that are cropping up everywhere at the moment. We vote for those people who show integrity and independence of the fossil fuel dominance and the fossil fuel money. Easy. All we need is to move the percentages of candidates who are voted in. Let's say, for instance, we get 10% of new candidates voted in. That will completely turn over the balance of power in Parliament. When the Greens, the Independents and the climate parties begin to unite, that's when we'll see a revolution. And that's when we as voters understand that, we can actually do this. This is possible. The revolution can happen at the next election. Done. Politics sorted. That is, if we begin to support those candidates I'm talking about in the sphere of the Greens, the Independents and the climate parties. So what we're talking about here is a climate revolution without any smoke. We're not burning off tires, we're not even protesting in the streets. We're fully able to control our anger. We collaborate, we're civilized, because we know we're winning. In an ever-growing global network of climate revolutionaries all over the place, in all countries all over the planet, we're turning the old model of extraction and destruction and pollution into regeneration, generosity, innovation, and doing good, both for ourselves and for the planet, with a shared vision that we can make this world a better place, and we need to do it fast, not just for humans, for everyone, for the koalas, the penguins, the ice bears, the fish, the guinea pigs, and so on. And then on to the real challenge, which is in the production, in the way that we make business, that we build our houses, we produce food, and so on. Agriculture and restoration of ecosystems is a big area. That's one that needs our support, also because it has a huge potential to draw down carbon from the atmosphere. But it's in the business sector and in the minds of the people who run the business that we need to see a true revolution now. We seem to think that there's always been this struggle between, on one hand, the people with a vision for a better world, and then on the other hand, those people who want to make business and make a profit. But in the climate revolution, and here I talk about this series of podcast episodes we're making in the Sustainable Hour, in this episode of the climate revolution, we are going to dig deeper into the business sector and show you that, hey, that's not the case at all. It doesn't have to be that making business means that we ignore taking care of the planet, of the environment, and the future generations. We have some good news and something that really, I think, can inspire business leaders to do the right thing right now. It can be exemplified, for instance, if you watch what I think is an extraordinary film that was premiered at the Transition Films Festival in Melbourne recently, a film that's called Beyond Zero, a film about an American carpet company. Here's how the director, the maker of the film, Nathan Havey, told us the story about how the film came about.
The journey is an arc that happens over 25 years. It starts in August 31st, 1994. And the sort of inciting incident is that there's a customer, a company in California that's building a new building, and they've got this environmental consultant that wants to make it as green as possible, all the way back in 1994. And the Interface sales rep gets the door essentially slammed in his face because he can't answer the question, what is Interface doing for the environment? And that question gets all the way up to the CEO, who says, I don't even understand the question. What is there to do for the environment beyond legal compliance? And Interface has been a legally compliant company, but as a carpet manufacturer, it's a extremely dirty, very petroleum intensive industry. And this sort of starts this soul searching for the company. And in the process of the soul searching, Ray Anderson, the CEO, finds Paul Hawken's book, The Ecology of Commerce. And his quote is that he stood there indicted as a plunderer of the earth, this captain of industry, right? And so Ray is an engineer, and he just kind of accepts on its face the argument that Hawken lays out. He calls it his spear in the chest moment. And he realizes that he is, where he thought himself to be a captain of industry, he is actually stealing the future from future generations of human beings on Earth, and that he must find a different way forward, as must all of business and industry. And he sets out to make his company an example of what that transformation needs to look like. And at the time, everybody thought he was insane 25 years later, though, even after he died in 2011, his company has succeeded in this journey, and they are in many ways just beginning the next chapter of this journey. It's a really inspirational story, and I think that it offers a very instructive roadmap to all of business and industry for what we need to do in the coming decade if we are going to have hope for solving the challenge of climate change.
Humans messed up the environment by accident. Imagine what happens when we fix the environment with intent.
By civilization's definition, I'm a captain of industry. The entrepreneur who founded a company that provides over 5,000 people with their jobs and supports their spouses and upwards of 12,000 children. In the eyes of many, a kind of modern-day hero. By my own definition, I am a plunderer of the earth and a legal thief. Someday, people like me may be put in jail. No one else, even at Interface, gets it just because I do. And for us to be successful, everyone has to get it. The old flawed view of reality holds to the belief that business exists to make a profit. When we are learning from our experience in this new paradigm that business makes a profit to exist, and it must exist surely for some higher purpose. What CEO do you know who really expects to stand before her or his maker someday and talk about shareholder value? Done right, the triple bottom line can come together to create a better way to bigger and more legitimate profits.
This is the mind shift that I had to take. You can engage your workforce so they're going to innovate and do things that we never even thought about doing. I mean, one thing people don't talk about is we get the best people in the industry because they want to work for Interface because of higher purpose.
I'm not just making carpet, which isn't the be-all and end-all for me. I'm making carpet for a company that has a conscience about what their impact is going to be in 100 years' time.
It just makes total business sense. I don't know how companies are going to survive in the next 20 years if they're not on this journey. Because people want to know what you're doing for society and the environment. It's not about making a dollar. It's about all three.
2020 will mark a way station on the journey to fulfilling our company's ultimate purpose. So I say to you, dream big, work hard, keep hustling, do good, not just no harm, and have fun along the way.
We're taking our cues from native ecosystems, and we're going to create a world that is generous, and we're going to reverse climate change.
Global climate change is the issue of our time. The world is at a crisis, and now is the time for us to act. But where do we start? Carbon is not the enemy. We are made of carbon. Our carpet is made of carbon. The earth is made of carbon. Regrettably, man has put carbon where it shouldn't be, in the atmosphere. And now's the time to bring carbon home. Doing no harm is simply not enough. Now is the time to move to positive impact, to bring carbon home together.
At its core, this is really about, I guess, changing the game of business. Because business, when the game is set up well, it is an incredibly creative force that can move resources and organize efforts better than possibly any other structure in modern society. It's just that the scoreboard on the game right now is mostly about profit maximization. And if we can expand the sphere of concern, and this is starting, right? If we can expand the sphere of concern for the game of business to include aligning the activities that we undertake with the natural systems and processes that sustain life on Earth, then it can marshal the entire creative force of modern business all around the world in service of solving climate change. But boy, we've got to get this right, and we've got to get it right in the next few years.
So this film to me is great because that can be shown, and people in 1 hour, they can see something that can really transform minds. So what do we do now? What are you doing to get it out in all the business schools, get it out to all the CEOs around the world?
We have an ambitious plan. First of all, I should say, Mick, that this is my first run at making a film. I come at this from a place of being a business consultant, where I've been working with different companies. I'm trying to establish a higher purpose. And one of the things that I think is really fundamental in doing that is you have to understand what business people aspire to. Right. And most of the stories that we tell in the business world are stories of people building huge companies and getting really rich. And that's what people aspire to if they're in the game of business. And we in many Western countries, and increasingly in Eastern ones as well, those people are held up as people to be lauded in society. Those are the folks that become sort of celebrities and really respected. And there is a different narrative, though, that we've got to sort of start, in my opinion, with showing these other examples of people like Ray Anderson, that not only were they successful business people, but they really delivered on a really important higher purpose. And I think that for millennials and for Gen Z, that very much is their aspiration as well. But where are the stories of those business leaders? And so they're out there, right? There are many other stories. It's just that in business school, we're still teaching case studies that are 20 years old. And so those are the stories to which students that study business aspire. There's even a statistic that shows that before people go into formal training in business and economics, they're much more egalitarian, and they're much more interested in making a positive impact in the world. But once they go through their degree programs in economics or in business, they come out thinking more like the quote unquote rational economic man that is supposed to be completely self-interested, right, and maximizing benefit to self. And we think that will then somehow, through the invisible hand of the market, create real benefit for the world. And in some cases, it can, but maybe not before we run the ecology of the planet off an irreversible cliff. And so it's this different, more holistic thing. So to answer your question, Nick, what we're trying to do about this is we have an aspiration to have this film become pretty much a household name in boardrooms and in business school classrooms in the world's top 20 economies to start. And so we are building, and we're building a program where we're hoping to get corporate sponsorship at the national level to make the film and associated education resources available for all education uses at no cost in at least those 20 economies, and hopefully beyond that. And we've got really wonderful partners in Europe and Latin America. The Transitions Film Festival in Australia has opened up many doors for us, including this interview, to try and find those both the sort of the advocates that have the business connections to be able to do this, and then those forward-thinking companies that would want to put their name on this film. I have a CEO in the United States that used a great metaphor. It's have their hand on the back of this film to help it get out there. And so that's what we're trying to do with business schools and with business education. And there are already 60 or 70 universities from all around the world that are planning on incorporating this into their curriculum, both this spring and in the fall. And then there are also major holding companies. There's one, I can't say the name, but one of the largest holding companies in the world made this film available to all of their executive teams. And this is at thousands of companies worldwide just this past week to be able to use this as a case study for the kind of conversation we need to be having when we talk about sustainability in business now.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what this film has done at a personal level for you as a business coach.
Sure. Yeah. I think to answer that well, we need to go back to it was my encounter with this story through one of Ray Anderson's books in 2010 that had me become a business coach in the first place. I'm a former congressional staffer in the United States Congress, and was there to try to use my life in a way that I could be proud of, but real quickly saw the pace of change was not a fit for me, and with no pejorative, not throwing any shade at people that work through that process. I have great respect for that. It's just not for me. I don't have the patience for it. And so I was casting about trying to figure out what else to do. Where else could I apply effort? And it was Ray Anderson's narrative that gave me both the spear in the chest and then showed the pathway forward. And so then years later, I had a chance to meet Ray Anderson's protege, a woman named Erin Mizan, who's in the film. And she accepted an invitation to do a storytelling event that I was doing in Atlanta, Georgia in 2017. And she told me about what's not in Ray's books. And I met other people at Interface that told me more. And I realized that this is a story that really has never been done justice yet. And I hope the film starts to. It's far too American, right? The people that are actually part of this story, I mean, the innovations came from Europe and Australia and Thailand, because Interface has a global footprint. And I didn't have the budget to be able to go and get the rest of the story. So the folks at Interface can, I hope, forgive me that. But when I encountered the story, it changed my worldview. And I've met so many people over the years where this is a uniquely powerful story. And yet, even in the sort of business as a force for good circles that I'm part of all around the world, it's maybe 1 in 3 have ever heard of this story. And if they've heard of it, it stops in 2011. Right. But what's happened between 2011 and now in the last decade at Interface is that's the story. And so to have the opportunity to be able to tell this next chapter of it it was just too good to pass up. So I was able to get the company's permission to use their film archive to try to tell this story in the way that we've told it, and here it is. So it's just about ready. And I think Colin's got his hand up there, so let's get him in here too.
Thank you, Nathan. Look, I'm a person who hasn't seen the film. I don't have mixed advantage. I just wanted to consolidate, if you like, with you that this is a documentary. This is a real story that you're telling, because your accent, and you're speaking to us from the US, aren't you? From where?
Yes, from Boulder, Colorado.
From Colorado. You see, for the rest of the world, much of America is Hollywood, and a lot of it is fiction. I just wanted to make and hammer home the point that you're telling a true story. This is not something that you've made up. And you are, as a filmmaker, does that mean that you were the person who put the money up? Or did you actually stand behind the camera? What did you do to create this film, for it to become your film, if you like?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Yes, it is a documentary. It is real. It is true. None of the names have been changed to protect the innocent or anyone else. This is as real a story as I'm able to tell. Now the American documentary filmmaker Ken Burns has a quote that I love a lot, and he says that all storytelling is lying, because in order to get an actual story to work in a way that people will pay attention to it, you are leaving out plenty of details. And there is so much on the cutting room floor of the nitty gritty of how they actually did this. I wish that we could make it, a 10-hour-long epic, and then we'd still not really get an understanding for how this kind of corporate change works. So I've done my best, and I am the writer and director. And so what a writer is when you're in a documentary film, right, is you're going through all of the archives and you are interviewing people and you're asking them the questions. And then you take those transcripts and all of the archival stuff and you try to edit it together into some sort of a form that will hopefully communicate the truth of the story in a way that won't bore people to tears. And so that was my role. Now, as far as the filmmaking is concerned, as I mentioned, I'm a consultant. And so I'm very fortunate that my father is a 40-year veteran of documentary filmmaking. And so I was able to work with his company. He and his partner, a guy by the name of Nathan Church, were behind the camera, setting up the lights, doing all the things. And then when I gave them the script, they cut all of the footage together and found all the B-roll and helped to splice in the music. And they really made see the film. They just would show me cuts, and I was able to work with them to say, let's change this tone is wrong, all that kind of stuff to come up with the cut that was screened at the Transitions Film Festival.
You pointed out rightly that it finished at 2011, and much has happened in the 10 years since. Are you working on a follow-up?
Well, this film it gets us all the way through 2019. So the end of this one is there was a big announcement where Interface actually was able to announce, the mission came to be called Mission Zero. And Mission Zero's deadline was 2020. So Interface would have effectively zero environmental impact in 2020. And it was about in 2016 that they realized that goal was in hand. They would actually do it, and they would do it in time. And the statistics here are 100% renewable energy at all of their factories around the world. They had reduced their water use by 92%, which is getting close to an irreducible minimum for what they were doing. And the big number that is kind of the crowd-pleasing moment at the end of the film is they reduced their greenhouse gas emissions by 96% from the baseline in 1996. And so it's effectively zero. And they had a big debate in 2016 about, should we really focus on that last 4% of carbon emissions, or is it time for us to set a new and dramatically bigger goal? And the major drama in the film in the third act is the wrestling match that they had to go through with the new CEO, who was really brought in to fix Interface's financial performance after Ray died, to get him not just to make the investments to hit their 2020 goal, which to his great credit, he really was very bold in doing that. So he gets a lot of credit for that. But if they were concerned about the state of the environment in 1994, how are they feeling in 2016? And so, they're part of the effort. And this is one of the things that's on the cutting room floor is Aaron Mizan did this global tour to talk with people in the plant in Australia and in Thailand and in the UK to ask them what the sustainability mission meant. And they said unequivocally, climate change. We have got to be the company that leads this. We have got to take on climate change globally and figure out what we can do. And so with that, the thing at the end of the movie is this moment at this idyllic, beautiful eco resort that was inspired by Ray Anderson. That's near the airport in Atlanta, Georgia. It's called Serenbe. So you've got Paul Hawken and Janine Benyus and a few other major environmental experts with some of the leading Interface team and the new CEO, and they spend 2 days just hammering the guy on climate science and on what's going on. And coming into it, he was a climate change skeptic, an admitted climate change skeptic. In hearing from those experts, and he credits Janine Benyus in really helping him to understand that there's hope, right? That there is something that we can do about this. It's not all doom and gloom, but we actually, the quote that was at the beginning of what Mick had played for us was his quote saying, humans messed up the environment by accident. Imagine what happens when we fix the environment with intent. And so after that, he makes the turn. They create this campaign called Climate Take Back, where now they have, just this year, they have begun manufacturing and selling all around the world a carpet tile that actually sequesters more carbon than if they hadn't made it at all. Right? So it's that kind of stuff. And the other thing that we say in the end of the film is their factory thing. They've got this thing called Factory is a Forest, where they're actually measuring the ecological services performed by the forest that's right next door to the factory, right? How much water is purified through the natural processes of this forest, how much air, how much cooling, how much habitat is being created, right? And then they're using that as a baseline metric, and their aspiration is to get their factories to actually perform the same services that the forest would be performing if the factory wasn't there. Yeah. Right. And so that's the new frontier for them, is rather than just minimizing the negative impact of their business operation, it is how can we maximize the positive environmental benefits that our company can achieve. Right. And Paul Hawken, in our interview with him, he said that in addition to minimizing carbon emissions and the environmental harms, companies have got to focus on the opportunities to maximize these environmental benefits because it buys us more time. right? It is absolutely essential that we get this into the business conversation now, and that's Hawkins' contention, and that for me was the thing that said, okay, we must make this film because I haven't heard that very much in business. The dominant conversation is still about reducing harm, but there's this complementary conversation that we've got to get into the mainstream as soon as possible, because it literally can buy us another decade if we get it right.
The thing about all this, Nathan, is that if businesses, corporations don't adapt these measures, they're gone. They don't exist anymore because people are demanding that happens.
Yes, and right. So increasingly, people are demanding it. Again, in the American context, Larry Fink is now demanding this. He's the CEO of BlackRock. It's the largest asset holder in the world. He is demanding for the third year in a row now that companies have got to have an aggressive plan to get to zero emissions. But he's not yet on the train with the regenerative stuff. Right. We are increasingly seeing consumer demand all over the place for this. And I mean, not to be too flip about this, but businesses are either going to get it right now and allow there to be a future for business, or they'll be gone in that the ecological services on which modern society is built will no longer function, and they will be gone one way or another, right? And so Jim Hartzfeld, who's one of Ray Anderson's early collaborators in the film, he puts it like this: is that it's like what we're doing right now is actually trying to secure a future for business at all, and that's why this change is so important.
In the process, they're building communities, they're strengthening communities.
Yes, it's such an important point, because a lot of times we think about this conversation just in terms of like the technical stuff with carbon emissions and sequestration, and it's inextricable from the human elements of this, right? And so Paul Hawken, again, on the cutting room floor, but in his interview, he made this analogy of, the farmer that is cutting down acres of trees in the Amazon, right, is doing that not because they might not understand the consequences. They're doing it out of economic necessity, right? Because the way the economic models work, that is the smart choice for them to clear that land for cattle grazing in the short term, right? But when you're looking at how do I feed my family, short term is what that is what you're doing, right? For the agricultural revolution that has to happen, it has to be in the immediate economic self-interest of farmers to do that, because that is the math. We all take care of our own immediate needs. And so until that system is shifted, until it makes economic sense to do that stuff, then we're just not going to get there. And so the human element of this, the human solution, is the critical part of what it's going to take to better align business systems with the changes that we need to make if we're going to turn the corner.
And importantly, very much so also internally in any company. One thing that I felt was missing in the film, and I acknowledge that you cannot tell everything in just an hour and a half, but you talked about what went on the floor in your cutting room. The story about, we hear it mentioned, the story about how does a CEO who has an idea, he said, we're going to climb Mount Sustainability. Yeah. How do you get your 5,000 employees to join you on that journey to climb Mount Sustainability?
My day job is the co-founder of the Institute for Corporate Transformation. And so what we actually do quite a lot of this and advising companies on exactly how this is done, because the interface story is a great case to study, and many schools do study it for this exact reason. But we believe that there are four critical elements to a wholesale corporate transformation, and this happens over a series of years. But all four of these, they're kind of like cornerstones, if you can think of it that way, that build the foundation for a transformation. Without one of them, then it can topple. And Interface very nearly toppled a couple of times. And so there really is some great learning to be had here. But number one, you've really got to have the CEO, and depending on the dynamics, the board have got to sort of understand this higher purpose at like a a deep personal level, right? So Ray Anderson, this was not a smart strategy. I mean, it was, but that's not why he did it, right? It was really this spear in the chest where he realized that he was complicit in something that his ethics could not abide. And so from that ethical, moral conviction kind of a place came this dedication. And that dedication, it transcends heat from stock market analysts, right? It has to be at that level. And so how does that happen? Right, Ray Anderson essentially just we flippantly say it's kind of the CEO gets hit upside the head and suddenly has this epiphany and their purpose, right? So if not that, then something has to really get there. And there's a guy that I'll reference. His name is Tim Kelly from the True Purpose Institute, and he does phenomenal work all around the world with CEOs to do this, and he's got some great methodologies on it. But that is number one, has to happen. Number two is once that happens, or sometimes before it, you've got to really align the sort of top level strategy conversations of the company with the fulfillment and delivery of that purpose. So the purpose can't just be something that lives over in the CSR or marketing department. It has to be the focus of all of the business activities. And Ray did that by insisting that everybody start to measure their impact on environmental metrics. And in 1994, they didn't even know what those should be. So it took them like 2 years to even figure out what mattered. And embarrassingly, again, on the cutting room floor, at first, they thought carbon was a benign emission. And so they thought that wasn't actually something that you needed to measure at all. And it wasn't until a few years later that they realized, this one's actually super important, right? So you're going to get it wrong. And so sort of having the understanding that this is going to be an iterative journey is a big part of that. So that strategic alignment at the top is number two. Number three is you have to empower the genius of everyone in your company and in your entire supply chain to deliver the innovations and the ideas that are going to do this. So Ray did not do this, right? It's the entire Interface family, all of those 5,000 associates. And the way that they did it was not, you will do this. This is a mandate from corporate. The whole thing was about inviting. Here's what we see. We think that this is important. Can you help us? The line that they used was, can you shine a light in the corner where you are to figure out how you in your job can help us to reduce these numbers, to increase performance in this? And it really was this all hands on deck effort, not from a you better or else kind of a mentality, but from this you're the ones that know. We don't know in the C-suite, right? And so that's very different from like a corporate culture standpoint. You have to build that, right? And so that's an absolutely critical piece. And then the specifics for Interface, they had this thing called Quest, Quality Utilizing Employee Suggestions and Teamwork, I think is what it stood for. So they had these Quest teams throughout the entire organization that then became the infrastructure for delivering and scaling these ideas. And then the final piece of it is that fourth piece. You can have all of those things, but if you don't then bake these things into the nitty-gritty details of the systems of the company, the HR systems, the legal systems, the financial measurement systems, then you're going to seem a hypocrite. And so those are the four elements, right? And so a company needs to sort of understand and have some attention to those things. And if it does, then even a company like Interface that was like 98% unsustainable petroleum-based carpet company can in time become what Interface is. And the thing that the last point I'll make about that is that it took Interface 25 years to do it. It's not going to take 25 years for companies now to make this change. They might be able to do it in 7. And it's like, the analogy that we use is in sub-Saharan Africa, they don't have to do the step in telecommunications where they lay like wire across the entire country because they can just skip straight to digital, right? Cell phones. It's similar in this journey towards sustainability because you're not breaking trail. You can follow the path of other companies. And so it is easier today for companies to do this than it's ever been by a long shot. And so long-winded answer to that, but that's what the Interface story can teach us.
You're talking to a crew who are in Geelong in Victoria, where we have one of the largest carpet factories in our state. And that's one that started in the 19th century making woolen carpets. I'd love it if you were to get a copy to us so that we could show it to the workers there. But my next question is the real one. Once they became sustainable, did Interface use that fact to sell? Because it's no good making your factory as sustainable as it can be if you're not successful as a business. So they had to convince people to buy their product, which in this case was a carpet. Did they use the fact that it's sustainable as a selling point? And did that work?
So yes, they did. Yes, it does. And there's a nuance. And so the nuance is that in many companies, the sustainability effort lands straight in the marketing department. And so they will try to spin anything that they kind of are doing that sounds like it's sustainable directly into marketing. And at Interface, in the beginning of this journey, Ray actually forbade the marketing department for saying anything about their sustainability journey. Jim Hartsfield, again, cutting room floor, but Jim Hartsfield told me that Ray actually called in their chief marketing officer and said, one word, and I will personally fire you that minute. Do not mess with this, all right? This is not greenwashing. We are going to do this for real. And so part of the reason that the Interface team today thinks that this story is still so little known is because it's that ethic at Interface that still pervades, right? So they will not say it for marketing until not only can they back it up, but some of the top environmental experts in the world will also say, yep, this is legit, right? Because they are their own harshest critic. And so one other piece of this is that Ray Anderson, when he would go and give speeches throughout this journey, he wouldn't say, my company is the global leader in green manufacturing for textiles, which they were very quickly, right? Never said it, never. He would say, I'm still a plunderer of the earth. We're not there yet. We've made great strides, but here's how far we still have to go. Here's where we're still screwing this up. And not just us, but all of industry, right? And so there's something that's different about that is really unique and really rare in business communications. And so with that as sort of the nuance and the qualifier, right? Once you can get over that hurdle, then yes, the industry Interface. I believe this is true. That Interface is for building designers. They can sort of select certain spec things when they kind of submit their proposal. And Interface is more written into those kinds of proposals than any other company in the world. So they are the preferred brand for most of the industry for the reasons that they have these incredible products. And the film goes into a couple of very specific stories where, because they were unwilling to make the trade-off between sustainability and profit, it forced them to innovate in ways that completely confounded most of the rest of the competition. So there's a couple of examples, but I think the clearest one is glue. Right, most carpet is still held down with glue, and glue has all kinds of negative environmental consequences. It makes it really difficult to recycle the carpet at the end of its life, and so it contributes to massive amounts of waste. The volatile organic compounds have really detrimental air quality and health effects, and so a lot of times you'll have to empty out an office for a week after you lay down new carpet to let the VOCs dissipate before it's safe to have human beings in the space again. I mean, what sense does that make? And so they were trying to innovate. And one of the things that Interface has done for years is they're students of biomimicry. And so how does nature solve these problems? Because nature's genius is something that we should often look to. And so the example that's in the film is they were in this workshop with Janine Benyus, and one of the groups was studying reversible adhesion, like geckos and flies and stuff like that. And another group was looking at how things stick together, like bird feathers. And long story short, one of them realized that bird feathers hook together because of these tiny little hooks and barbules that are all along the feathers. And nature doesn't really use glue. Right, it uses gravity in almost all cases to hold things down. And so these two different tables realized, wait a minute, if you were to hook the carpet tiles together, then gravity holds the whole thing down and you don't even need glue. And so when they made that thing, they have these tiny little polyethylene squares that hook the four corners of the carpet tile together, so the whole thing just lays down. And then as soon as you figured that out, you don't need glue anymore. Well, they can open up the market for residential uses of their carpet, because essentially you can make the carpet into area rugs that people can just install themselves in their houses, right? And like, if I may, I just moved to Boulder. I was just touring a house that we're looking at buying. And I walked into this guy's office in this house and I looked down and I'm like, that's Interface carpet. And I peeled it up and sure enough, it was stuck just with the polyethylene squares. I'm like, this is exactly what they're talking about, right? And so it makes them more resilient. It opens up new markets. It dramatically outperforms any of the competitors' products. And now everybody's doing it because it totally makes sense. But in terms of the opportunity for game-changing, industry-defying business innovation, right? Ray Anderson's great quote is, sustainability does not cost, it pays. And so if you look at it this way, it really is a phenomenally powerful business strategy that ought to please any Wall Street analyst.
I've got two close family members that are part of old business, I guess, and I've been working on them for some time now. How can I get the movie to them to show them and have a discussion around it? Is it available?
Well, not yet. So we're still in festival competition, and so I can't release it until after we are kind of through that process. Otherwise, we get disqualified. So bottom line is, we are actively engaging corporate screenings behind the scenes right now as private corporate screenings. So at beyondzerofilm.com. Anybody can request educational screening, request a corporate screening. We could be in touch for that. But the plan is we tentatively have the theater that is in The Hague booked for a European premiere screening for this film on August 31st. But you remember that date? That's the anniversary of the day that Ray gave that first speech in a shabby hotel conference room in Atlanta, Georgia, 1994, right? So it's the 27th anniversary. It's not a real big one, but more importantly, the next day, September 1st, is the day that there are 100 months left in this decade. And so we're using that screening as the beginning of hopefully a campaign all around the world to play a game of how much progress can we make in the next 100 months. And so we're hoping to do national premiere screenings everywhere we can all around the world between September 1st and the COP26 UN Climate Summit, which is November 1st in Glasgow, Scotland, right? And so Interface has a presence there. So we've applied to officially be part of that event, and whether we get in or not, there will be a screening during that event in Glasgow, Scotland. And then after that, we're hoping to really open the floodgates on all of the educational screenings, as well as working with national partners, perhaps even like yourselves, to really kind of scale up this effort. Because it's me and like 4 other people in the production team for the movie. So we can't handle it. So we're trying to build the infrastructure and get national representatives to be able to represent the film all around the world so that they can get it into lots of different companies all over the place between November of this year and about a year following, when we would seek to be able to do a full public release of the film. That's the plan.
That's wonderful, Nathan. I don't think you need the other 4 people. You're a force on your own.
Well, I mean, with their incredible help, right? So just as an example, if I may, let me tell you one story. We screened the very first scene that we had done in this film is early in, there's the scene of Ray. So what happens, again, for those that haven't seen it, right? Ray reads this book from Paul Hawken, has the spear in the chest moment. And then this is in like the day or two before he's supposed to give this speech for this environmental task force that's supposed to be coming up with an answer for that customer, right? What is Interface doing for the environment? And so Jim Hartsfeld is the guy that was in charge of convening that task force. And he asked Ray, like, we need an environmental vision here. Like, what, I don't know. And I'm the new guy. What CEO? Founder, what is our environmental vision? And Ray didn't have one. And so this book lands on his desk and he says, holy smokes, like, buckle your seatbelts. And so when they all convene on August 31st, 1994, they're thinking that it's going to be, some new recycling program or something, ho-hum, corporate, whatever. And Ray comes in and talks about essentially starting a second industrial revolution on Earth. To bring all of industry in line with ecological practices and principles. And the way they're going to do it is by having Interface be the case study, right? And it goes over like a lead balloon, people literally ask each other, like, does he have a terminal diagnosis? Is he trying to get right with God before he dies? Like, that was actually the reaction, right? But then he just doubles down and doubles down and doubles down. And pretty soon people realize this is not the flavor of the month. He's not kidding. And we're going to go on this journey, right? So that scene of that meeting, including the reaction, was the very first thing that we had done. And we had it done in time for the 25th anniversary of that moment in 1994. And so a couple months later, there's this conference, this is before COVID, of the it's the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit. So it's 300 CEOs, mostly American CEOs, at this really swanky resort outside of Austin, Texas. And I get permission at the last minute to show this about 8-minute clip. And so they show it. And I hear a CEO come to the back of the room within earshot of me, and he says to his partner, "What's our thing that's like that?" And I'm like, okay, that's what I want. That's what I want, right? But also in the room that day was Diana Proper de Callejon, who is now the film's executive producer. And she is one of the leaders at a company called Cranemere that is it's an investment firm in New York that buys companies, and they hold them for decades and decades so that they can make tremendous advances in the environment. And Diana is an extremely well-connected person. And so thanks to her representing this film and getting it in front of lots and lots of different people, we've had the ability to do everything that we've done, because I can't do that, right? But thanks to Diana and thanks to the help of some other folks, again, like you, that have seen the film, liked it, and said, you know what about this? We have been able to come up with all the plans and the strategies that we've got, and knock on wood, we'll be able to actually execute this stuff this fall.
We will see big changes in the world, and therefore big changes in behavior and in consumer behavior. What you currently see, of course, for example, is that companies like Coca-Cola, energy companies like Shell are more and more scrutinized for their behavior. Coca-Cola is producing 3,500 single-use plastic bottles every second. Therefore, one of the biggest polluters of the planet as far as plastic is concerned. Consumers don't accept it anymore. People that live all over the world are not going to accept that anymore. We see that now, signs of that during the COVID crisis, but we will see more and more signs in the future, and as we have seen in the past. When we look at the ecology, that is not improving at all. The ecological situation is not only the CO2 in the sky and the warming of the planet. It is way, way, way more. We see food shortages all over the world. We see health problems, education. People cannot go to education anymore. We see a very, very wrong division of wealth all over the world. We see the oceans that are being polluted heavily, the sky that is being polluted. So in all cases, we are running to the verge of what the planet, what nature can give us. And that will have a huge influence on the whole world, on the circular way of thinking, and also on procurement. Where do we get our stuff from? Do we eat strawberries in a period of time that there are no strawberries here? Do we fly them in from all over the world? Or is it going to be local for local? The Earth Overshoot Day is the moment that we on the planet consume more than the planet can reproduce in a year. Countries like, for example, the Netherlands and the United Kingdom are at that point. In May, so that means that the UK on the 17th of May is consuming as much as the planet can produce in a year. So they're over-consuming for the rest of that year. And you can even measure that to yourself. How are you as an individual doing that? How are you as a company doing that? And because of all of this, you see a whole new kind of companies coming up. And we call them the B Corps. And they say business as a force for good. There are many B Corps in Europe, already 800. The biggest food company, one of the biggest food companies in the world, Danone, is working on becoming a B Corp, is a B Corp in many countries already. So you see more and more companies that are making a fundamental change in their existence. The sky and the sea, who do they belong to, you think? Well, the answer is they belong to nobody. They used to be the commons, they used to belong to everybody, but they don't belong, and because they don't belong to anybody, we see that those commons are very poorly used. The sea is polluted, the sky is polluted, because if no one is to blame, everyone is to blame. And that is one of the big problems that we see. The worsening of the ecological system and the globalization, exponential technology lead to mega shifts. And the mega shifts we have divided in 8 areas. One is nature. A change that is taking place says that nature doesn't belong to us. We are part of nature. Long time, we as human beings have thought we can just pick forever everything that we have, that the planet has to offer. We use everything, it's for free, But it isn't. It isn't. We are part of nature. The fact that we use the word nature as a separate word means that we don't think we belong to them. We are part of nature. Second is consumption is changing. There is a massive overconsumption in many parts of the world. And people are beginning to think of that. Shouldn't I buy less? Shouldn't I eat a little bit less? Shouldn't I eat healthier? So that consumption pattern of the people is going through a major shift at the moment. Like also is money and values. Values and money. What is money used for? Is it used for the real economy? Who owns the money? Is it not in the hands of a very few people? Why is it so that Facebook, using property, assets of human beings, 2.2 billion human beings, is becoming rich, and all those human beings are not? Why is that? Why is it so that we see this wrong division of wealth? Thanking the soil means that we understand that the ownership of the land should not be in the hands. It should be of all. We see changes in that. We're thinking differently about work. A FTE means a full-time equivalent. We are full-time equivalents. We are in a spreadsheet. We talk about human resource management instead of human being management. We see humans as a resource for the economy and not the economy as a resource for human beings. So all those changes are taking place at a very rapid rate. And what is the society gaining by technology? We are now asking ourselves that. We didn't in the past. So, and we will see changes because of that. We already see changes because of that. So we see a different kind of leadership, leaders that care for the future, that is necessary, that we will have that. And those mega shifts have a fundamental impact on those 8 areas that society consists of. If you look at the moment, because the COVID crisis is actually speeding up that whole change. So we see proof that things are happening. In the fact that when you look at schooling, teaching, what we see now is that children at home are getting schooling from a whole different perspective, more individual, distant. We see also a very large appreciation now for healthcare. We didn't see that before. Those people didn't get normal salaries, they had to work hard, and people didn't see the value. Now we see who has value for our society. We see local for local food production, and not any longer the long stretches and flying food in from all over the world. We see a wish for healthy food, organic food, and that is also being speed up by the COVID crisis. So the changes that we see in energy, it's going to cheaper, cleaner energy, Of course, it's going to cleaner energy. We see a change in mobility also in the COVID crisis that is changing much more rapidly than we would ever have imagined. We are talking about a better division of wealth, local production, value for society. Those are the changes that we're seeing. And as a logical consequence of all that, very logical consequence, we see that actually only sustainable companies can survive. Why? Because that's what the consumers want. That is what the consumers want. Unilever already has seen that the products, 20% of the products that have a purpose, that means something to the planet and to the people, have a far higher profit margin. So, and why is that? Because people are willing to pay more for value. People are looking for value. And you see that now. You see health and sustainability coming up, distance shopping, online courses. So you see many changes in the world. So how can you work your way out of the crisis? And I'm talking about crisis with an E, not only the COVID crisis, because the COVID crisis is going to be followed by an economical crisis, and that is going to be followed by an ecological crisis. And those are bigger and bigger. So we have to be smart, and we have to think, how can we change ourselves, and how can we work and survive as a company and as human beings in the world as we go forward. One of the tools is the SDG Action Manager that was developed by B Lab for the B Corps together with the United Nations based on the Sustainable Development Goals. Very useful tool for any company of any size to change themselves intrinsically. You can become a B Corp, and there is all kinds of other tools like the Changemaker from the United Nations, the SDG. You can do the Move the Date, as you see here. Schneider Electric did that. You can do that on an individual basis. You can do that as a company. There are many tools available online that you can use to make a change, and you should make a change. Because if it is not me, then who? And if it is not now, then when? And if it's not here, then where? With this short presentation, I hope I've given you an insight in how the world is changing and what the next frontier looks like and how that is influencing the consumers, the people of this planet, and how that behavior change will influence your business.
This was a PowerPoint presentation that Leen Zevenbergen gave last year at a Reuters Events online video conference. Leen Zevenbergen is the co-founder of B Lab Europe. And when you hear him talking about using business as a force for good, I think he himself is a force for good. He's giving these talks and he's writing books about how business can do it, how it's all happening. The world is changing and so is consumer behavior. And if business leaders don't get that, well, I'm not sorry, but you will be sorry, dear CEO. You'll be sorry and all your employees will be sorry. Because you will be out of business, not because of maybe the climate disruptions, which are of course scheduled to arrive much later, but because of consumer change. The business world and all its chambers of commerce and its committees for this and that, you need to wake up and understand what's going on. You need to change your direction, your attitude and your strategies, just like we've heard Nathan talk about it. There are ways to do things and we need to start doing them now. Rotary have understood that. They had a conference just recently and I would love to play some clips from there, but that'll have to be for a next episode of the Climate Revolution, because the hour is up and I'm about to round off. And I would say, if you like what you heard, if you like this talk about climate take back and the advice that we got from Nathan, I suggest that you sign in, become a subscriber to the Climate Revolution podcast series, which is the same as to be a subscriber to the Sustainable Hour in your podcast player on your phone. Or you can go to climatesafety.info and find the series there. I promise you we have lots more of interesting things on our way. And if you watch the film Beyond Zero that we've talked so much about today, yes, it is a very American film, and there's this style of Hollywood storytelling in the film, in the way that it's put together. But really, I think the scoop in that story is Ray Anderson, the CEO who died in 2011. There was a man of conscience, a man with integrity, someone who understood the responsibility it is to be a leader, to be a manager, to be a CEO. When you have the heart for the earth and for all the living beings on this planet, you actually have that power to change a large polluting company's culture right at its core, right down to the very perception of why it exists on this planet, in this life. And then it's not just a story about carpets any longer, or about storytelling techniques. This is a story about who we are, about what we stand for, about how we inspire others, how we can pass on an idea, that crazy idea that we, as a company and as humanity, we can climb up Mount Sustainability, we can shift the direction and go even beyond zero, right to that point where what you do and whatever products it is that you produce in your company, you can pull carbon out of the atmosphere instead of pushing it up there. We can leave a better world than if these products had not been produced. And that's what business needs to be from now on. Here in Australia, we can watch the movie Beyond Zero until the 15th of March because it's featured on the Transitions Film Festival, which ends on the 15th of March. Tickets sell at $12 for an online access, so I hope you watch it from your computer or your TV screen at home. And if you liked Leen Zevenbergen's presentation, I suggest you have a listen to his podcast. It's called B-Talk. You find it on Spotify. For instance, episode number 10 was about a CEO who's made a successful but quite dramatic remake of a multinational company with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a compass. I'll put links out to all of these things we've talked about in the podcast notes. Sustainability does not cost, it pays, said Ray Anderson from Interface. The climate revolution begins in your head.